Hi students, this is Dr. Spellman, and in this lesson we're going to talk about Plato's The Ring of Gyges. All right. So in this lesson we're going to discuss this question about why we should be moral, and the Ring of Gyges example, myth, I guess, yeah, myth, that's the right one. This myth is one that's helpful for thinking about that question. So this excerpt that you read, The Ring of Gyges, comes from Plato's Republic, which many think of as Plato's greatest work. So in this longer book, right, Plato's trying to explain what justice is, why we should be just, and how we can become just, how we come to be moral. Where we pick things up in this reading is at a point where Glaucon is wondering whether being just, that is, being moral, is good in and of itself, or whether it's only good for the sake of something else. In short, he's wondering whether there's any benefit to being just or being moral that's over and above the benefits that come from appearing to be just. So the thought is everybody agrees that if we appear to be just, that's good for us, but should I be just even when it won't help me appear to be just? Like if I could get away with injustice, should I do that? So this is where we get the myth. Gyges, he's this shepherd for the king of Lydia. He was watching his sheep, and there's an earthquake. It creates a hole in the earth. Inside that hole, there's a hollow brass horse that has doors, and Gyges opens the doors and sees a corpse with a gold ring on its finger. Some people might think like, ooh, a corpse, creepy, I'm out of here. But Gyges, that's not him. He's like, I'm taking that ring, and he gets back to work. Gold, man. Hey, take it. So later that day, shortly thereafter, right, Gyges notices that when he turns the collet of the ring inwards, others talk about him as if he wasn't there. But when he turns the collet of the ring outwards, they stop doing that. So the collet of a ring, like if you think of a diamond ring, it's got that fancy diamond sitting like, on one side or whatever. The thought is like the collet is that thing holding the fancy, whether it's a diamond or some other stone or whatever. So when it's inwards, Gyges seems to disappear. People don't really notice him around. But when he turns it outwards, they, they seem to see him. They stop talking about him. And so he realizes, right, when he turns the collet of his ring inwards, he's invisible. And so he devises this plan. He says, hey, I'm going to sign up to be a messenger to the king. And when he goes into the king to see the king, right, he, I guess, becomes invisible, somehow seduces the queen. I don't understand how invisibility helps with that, but sure, I guess so. And with her help, he conspires against the king, ultimately killing him and taking over the kingdom. That's Gyges for you. Now, Glaucon, in this dialogue, this myth is being presented by Glaucon, and Glaucon sort of says, imagine there were two such rings, and the just put on one of them, that is the just person or a moral person put on one of the rings, and the unjust or immoral person put on the other ring. No man, he says, could be imagined to be of such an iron nature that he would stand fast in justice. So Glaucon's idea is that, should we be moral? That's the question. He says, now imagine this example that you're familiar with, Socrates, right? You know the myth of the Ring of Gyges. You know this guy Gyges. You know that he takes over the kingdom, right? Imagine that you could give this ring to anybody, right? Now maybe you think this Gyges is like an unjust guy and that's why he does immoral stuff. But actually, anyone who had this ring would do immoral stuff. That's Glaucon's claim. Now, I want you to think for a second, right? What would you do if you had Gyges' ring? Like if you could be invisible, what sorts of things might you do with that ring? I want you to think about it for a second and, think about it honestly. Some people, when I ask them about this, are like, oh, I just live my life the same as I do. seems unlikely to me that you would live exactly the same if you could be invisible sometimes. So, think about it. What would you do differently if you could be invisible? And maybe you want to pause the video now and think about this for a little bit. Once you're ready, unpause it. All right. Here's another question I want you to think about. So imagine you have the ring and you see the opportunity to use it to steal money from a wealthy stranger who won't know that you took it and won't suffer serious hardship as a result, right? Like, I'm not sure who you should think about right here, like Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, or, think about somebody, not that you like dislike though, right? Someone who you're like, they're just really rich and I could steal something from them. And it's so small to them that they won't even notice that I took it. And um, yeah, it won't make them any worse off. It's insignificant to them, but it would be significant to me. Would you steal that money? And why, or why not? Um, Again, maybe your gut reaction is like, no, I'm not a thief, but think about it hard, right? Imagine that you had this ring and you knew you could get away with it. So think about that for a second. Again, pause if you'd like to and restart the video when you think you've settled on an answer. All right. Now, I want to, before we go any farther, I think it's important to introduce some terminology or some concepts that we don't have yet. And so I'm going to use this little exercise. When I'm in class, right, I ask students these questions, but I'm going to tell you what I suspect your answers would be to many of these questions. So, and then we'll get the same idea. So, why are you in class today? So, why are you watching this video? You might want to think about it. Well, I'm watching this video because my professor told me to. I'm supposed to. Maybe you're doing it right because you ultimately want a good grade. You want the credit for watching it. Okay, so you want to get a grade. But then I just ask, well, why do you want that? Why do you want a good grade in the class? Maybe you say, well, I want to get a degree, and I need a good grade in this class to get a degree, or to get, you know, a better mark on my transcript that's going to help me do what? Again, why get a degree? Who cares about that? Like, it's just a piece of paper. If you want a piece of paper that says you got a degree from Ohio Northern University, I can print one of those off for you. Well, you say, okay, it's not about the piece of paper per se, it's just the credential that I need to get a good job, and that's really what I want. I want the job. But then I could just ask the question about that. Why do you want a good job? Like, do you want to work the rest of your life? Wouldn't you rather just like not have a job? And, people might differ on that. Maybe some people want a job, some people don't. But I think a lot of you will say, oh, yeah, I want a job. And the reason I want a job is to make money. Again, though, we can ask, why do you want to make money? Why is money so important to you? Again, these little pieces of paper, I could give you something that says $1 on it, or $100, or $1,000,000, whatever you want. I'll just print money. But no, you want actual money, right? Because you think it's going to buy you stuff, buy food or buy clothes or whatever it is. Then the question is, well, why do you want those things? Why do you want food or clothes? And there, things might seem more straightforward, like food and clothes. Oh, those are pretty important to stay alive. But now here's another question. Like, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to stay alive? Now, maybe it's kind of a dark question, right? So, and obviously, if you experience depression or something, you're having thoughts of suicide, you should obviously contact someone about that, right? To talk about it, reach out for help there. So I don't want to. I hope we're not honestly contemplating suicide at the moment, but thinking about, like, what is the purpose of continuing to live? What is the purpose of continuing to go on with life? What do we live for? What's the meaning or bigger purpose of life? Hmm, that one's harder. I find that students often pause here and they're like, I don't know. And then eventually sometimes they sort of come around to like, okay, well, maybe I want to get married, I want to have kids. Those things seem important to you. And maybe you want the money to buy the food and the clothes to support the family ultimately. But then we can just say, like, why do you want a family? What's the point of that? Um, and one thought might be, well, I just want my kids to get good grades. I want them to get degrees. I want them to get jobs. I want them to make money and for them to support families. And then I'm like, well, this all looks a bit circular. Like, what is really the goal here? Maybe you're confused if all of this is just to put other people in the same position as you. There must be something that you actually like in life, something that actually like makes it worth living, what gives you value. Um, and here I think maybe sometimes the answers are like not that inspiring, but or maybe more accurate. Like, what makes life worth living or what makes life fun? Well, maybe some of the things you really like are like watching movies or watching television shows or something like that. Like maybe those are the things that you like most in life, right? Maybe others of you, um, well, okay, I guess. Maybe others of you like playing sports, playing music, or developing those relationships, having conversations, having like meaningful, thoughtful ideas. Um, those experiences, right, could be things that are the kinds of things that make life worth living. So, um, yeah, the goal here is not to like get you to deeply question like, is life worth it or something like that. That's not the goal. The goal is to get you to think about like, what are the things that are meaningful and ultimately the things that you're sort of shooting for in life that make it good. Okay, now that we've sort of gone through this experiment, like why am I doing all these things? We can draw a distinction between intrinsic goods and instrumental goods. So intrinsic goods are things that are good for their own sake, not for the sake of something else. They're the things that you really want that make life worth living, that sort of thing. Things like eating chocolate, riding roller coasters, watching television, all these things are things that you do for their own sake. You don't eat chocolate so that you can do something else, like run a marathon or um, make friends or something like that. You eat chocolate because it's good. Like you just enjoy that activity itself. Same with riding roller coasters. You don't ride roller coasters to get fit or to increase your courage. I mean, I guess you could ride a roller coaster to try and become more brave. But usually the reason we ride roller coasters is because we like them. They're just fun. Same with watching television, right? We do it for its own sake, not for the sake of something else. These kinds of intrinsic goods, and here maybe I'm giving examples of activities, are contrasted with instrumental goods or activities that we do for the sake of other things. So these definitions are kind of important, right? This idea of an intrinsic good is good for its own sake, not for the sake of something else. That definition is important. Instrumental goods good for their own sake. Sorry, instrumental goods good for the sake of something else, but not necessarily for their own sake. So examples here, something like caring for people who are sick. You don't like, I mean, maybe some people like doing this. Usually if you like it though, it's because of the relational benefits. But like imagine someone throws up all over the place. Like, do you like throwing up cleaning that up? No, probably not. The reason you do it is for the sake of something else, to help the relationship, because you like things clean. Maybe you make money doing this, right? Those are all reasons to clean up puke, but you don't do it for its own sake. There's nobody out there who's like, oh, I just love cleaning up people's puke. That'd be really weird. Um, Another thing, like making money or having a job, you usually do that for the sake of something else. You don't like make money just because you like having money. Maybe money provides you security or something like that, or like it makes you less anxious about your future. But it's that like reducing the anxiety then. the money is merely an instrumental good for the sake of something else. You don't actually like value the money on its own. Finally, I put working out over here. Maybe working out is different for you, but for me, it's like I don't like that. Working out for fun, no, thank you. Um, Now, working out in a way that maybe gets me in relationship with other people. So, like, I'm thinking if I want to run with a friend or play basketball or something like that, then hey, like, I'm being competitive. Those are things I like. But if you're like just lifting weights or running for fun on my own, I do not want to do those things. Not intrinsically, right? But do they have instrumental value? Sure. Maybe, I want to stay fit. Working out will help with that. Or if I'm a golfer and I was on a golf team, right? I want to hit the ball farther. Maybe I need to lift some weights to help get stronger. So the only reason I'm going to work out is if it's giving me something instrumental value. I do not like working out for its own sake. It's good for the sake of other things, not for itself. Okay, so we've got intrinsic and we've got instrumental goods. I want to introduce the idea like you could have both, right? There are some things that are good both for their own sake and for the sake of other things. Plato gives some examples, or Socrates gives some examples that are kind of not great, or at least they're different in the fact that they're like just things rather than activities. So they point out examples like knowledge. Maybe knowledge is good for its own sake, but knowledge is also good because it helps you get things, right? It helps you, the more you know, right, the more you can achieve. Maybe it's good to know stuff about ethics, but it also like can help you get a job, especially if you're an ethicist. Sight, right? Just the experience of viewing beautiful things is maybe pleasurable. Um, well, okay, now is that intrinsic or just instrumental? Like the ability to have sight and see stuff, right? You might think, well, that's just valuable. But it's also useful for other things, maybe like dodging cars or dodging punches from other people or something like that, knowing where to go to get food. Um, so sight can be something's just good about being able to see, and then there's something good about what it can get for you: food, clothing, avoiding pain, those sort of things. And then health. Maybe there's just something valuable about being healthy, like in itself, but being healthy also allows you to go around and do other things. Like if I'm not healthy, I can't play basketball. So health is good on its own, much better than being sick on its own, right? It feels good just to be healthy, but then being healthy can also enable me to go do other stuff. Okay. Um, if we were giving like examples of activities that were both, maybe something like I gave the example of playing basketball. I like to play basketball for its own sake. Like just playing basketball is fun, but it also has these like side benefits of being good for my health. And so it's like intrinsically good for its own sake, and it's instrumentally good for the sake of the things it gets me. Other examples? Oh yeah, food. Like imagine there's some healthy food that you like to eat. So I was thinking about something like apples, right? Apples might be good because they're tasty on their own and they're also like healthy. And so whereas eating chocolate's intrinsically good, maybe an instrumental good is something like eating broccoli, I don't know, something you don't really like, or spinach or something that doesn't taste so hot, but you're doing it for the health benefits. And there's like eating an apple, which is good for its own sake and good for the sake of other things. Okay, we've got this distinction in mind. The question is, where should justice go? Is justice an intrinsic good, good for its own sake, not for the sake of other things? Is it an instrumental good, good for the sake of other things, but not for its own sake? Or is it both? Is it good for its own sake and for the sake of other things? It's a little tricky question. So, what is justice? The act of being moral. Is being moral good for its own sake, good for the sake of other things, or both? Where would Glaucon put it, right? He's given us this myth of the Ring of Gyges. He says, even a good person, if they had the ring, they would do immoral stuff. what that suggests is that on Glaucon's view, being just is an instrumental good. So Glaucon's going to say, hey, it goes over here. The only reason we're just is because we like the benefits of appearing to be just. So if we could get away with injustice, if nobody would notice, then we wouldn't actually be just. We would be unjust because we just want the stuff, right? The money or whatever it is that we could steal. But Socrates disagrees with Glaucon. He agrees that appearing to be just is good, though being just is instrumentally good for us. But he thinks there's also something good, that justice is also good for its own sake. That even if being just was going to make us look bad, that there would still be reason there to be just nonetheless. All right, so we're going to look at kind of their arguments or like why they think this. So first, let's talk about Glaucon. So Glaucon looks at Gyges and says, look, no one in Gyges' situation would be just. Everyone in that situation, if they could get away with doing injustice, they would do it. They'd try to cheat. Now, if that's true, then he thinks the only reason people are just is that it's in their interest to appear to be just. So when we think about Gyges, his situation, and we think everyone who has this invisibility ring would do unjust things, if that's right, then it suggests that the only reason people are just at the end of the day is because they want to look just, not because there's actually something valuable there in about being just. And if that's true, if the only reason people are just is that it's in their interest to appear to be just, then justice must be a mere instrumental good. It's not good for its own sake. So that's his conclusion. Justice is only instrumentally good. Now, whenever I give you an argument, I think it's good for you to think about, is that argument a good one? So I'll tell you, we'll talk later in the semester about validity, but I'll tell you right now that it's valid. So if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. But we might wonder whether the premises are true. So think about it. Is there one of these premises that you would deny? And would you deny that maybe some people in Gyges' situation would be just, even though they could get away with injustice? Maybe you admit that everyone would be unjust, but you think there's some other explanation for this other than the fact that they just want to appear to be just. Yeah, worth thinking a little bit about. Okay, so yeah, here's a question. Do you think there are any benefits to being moral or just that are over and above the benefits of just appearing to be just? So what would the benefit be of being just other than the fact that you get to look good to other people, right? If people see you being moral, they're probably more likely to be nice to you. And that's kind of Glaucon's thought, like the reason you're just is just to look good to other people, and other people will treat you better. But he's sort of thinking, imagine you could get away with being unjust all the time. Wouldn't you do it? Okay, now Socrates responds by trying to argue and articulate why justice might be good for its own sake. That is, why we might choose justice, even if it didn't pay off in terms of us appearing to be just. So, like, maybe a simple way to ask it, why be just even when no one's watching? Is there really a reason there? Socrates thinks the answer is yes. Okay, so Socrates is going to deny premise 1 of Glaucon's argument, the claim that no one in Gyges' situation would be just. To explain why that is, he needs to describe what justice is in a city, and then he ends up arguing that justice in a city is analogous to justice in the soul. I'm like, where is this going, Dr. Spellman? Like, help me here. Yeah, so I'm talking about what goes on in the rest of the book. So in this reading that you had, it was shorter. You wouldn't have read this bit, but the rest of the book, in some sense, is dedicated to Socrates trying to like answer the challenge that Glaucon set out for him here. Like, why be moral? Socrates is going to try and do that. Again, it depends on this analogy, and the thought is like, since injustice in a city is bad for the city, he thinks that, and the city's like the soul, he thinks that injustice in the soul is bad for the soul. Injustice in the person is bad for the person. Okay, to understand this view, we've got to like think about psychology a little bit. Now, Plato, Socrates, their psychology, their like views about human psychology were obviously like created before we had the discipline of psychology. So they're not like these aren't scientific views. These are pre-scientific views, but views that have some plausibility or that there's something there that they're getting at that seems right. So um, Plato, Socrates, they had this view that the soul has these three parts. There's a appetitive part, that's the like dragon, the multi-headed snake thingy. There's the lion, and then there's the person or the rational part. So there's the appetitive part on the left, there's the spirited part or the emotional part in the middle, and then there's the rational part on the right side. And now let's go, I guess maybe I should go back. So when you think about the appetitive part, his thought is like we have different desires inside of us or different things that are trying to point us in different directions. So our appetites point us in one direction, right? We like drugs, sex, rock and roll, music, our appetites, we want certain things. We're pulled towards them or we're attracted to them. And that's the appetitive part saying like, yes, get more money, get more food, get more drugs. Those are good things for you. Then there's the spirited part. The spirited part is like our emotions. It's not like attracted to like stuff as much as like maybe different people like react emotionally to different things. Like, I don't know, beauty maybe is moving to other people. One thing that's really moving to me emotionally is like injustice. So if someone does something mean to you, right, you get really mad or upset, frustrated. Those emotional reactions are the spirited part of you. They're not like a desire for some particular thing, rather they're like, an emotion within you that's moving you to correcting the injustice or, getting even with the person, something like that. And then finally, there's a rational part of you, a part of you that is more measured, less emotional, I guess. It's trying to do the calculations and figure out what the right course of action is in any particular situation. We all have this experience, like maybe sometimes like we're like, oh, I should do this thing, like the rational thing to do or the the thing I want to do intellectually is this. But then when we like get in that moment, we have a hard time actually doing that thing. Like for me, maybe it's like at bed, like I should like read a book. That would be good for me. But then when like I'm actually laying in bed, it's like, well, I could play chess. That would be more fun. So I've got that like battle going on, right? And that's a battle between like parts of my psychology and Plato or Socrates' view. He's got like the appetitive part fighting against the rational part, something like that. Now he thinks all those parts are like inside of you in some sense. Um, and different people have different parts of them ruling. So on the one hand, we can imagine a person whose like appetitive part is ruling or in charge. And that person, right, we might think of like as the addict. They're the person whose desires rule them. And so they're always going around the world, maybe not listening to the rational or the spirited part as much as like that appetitive part. They're trying to satisfy their appetites. Someone who's like an alcoholic, right? Um, that that like desire for alcohol is controlling them, and that's like not a situation you want to be in, right? um, that's like kind of a bad life. Then we could imagine someone whose spirited part rules. This kind of person, right, maybe they're like always going off the emotional deep end, like maybe with anger, sadness, joy. I'm not sure that I can imagine these people quite as well, but we all know people who like get angry or too irritable, right? Um, they're always getting upset about something. That person, their spirited part is too strong and it's like dominating these other parts. And that's also Socrates and Plato think like not really a good way to be. You don't want really your spirited part ruling you and making decisions about what you're going to do. Well, finally, we have the rational part, the person whose rational part rules. And Plato and Socrates thought this is actually good. Like this is what this is kind of the situation you want. You don't want the appetites to be in charge. You don't want the spirited part to be in charge. You want the rational part to be in charge. That's not to say that you don't want to have appetites. We all have those, but they should be ruled or like controlled by our reason. So if we're going to drink alcohol, we need to do it in a sort of to a rational degree. We don't drink so much, right, that we sort of ruin our life prospects. Same, it's good to have emotions, but we don't want to be emotionally out of control, right? We want to allow our emotions to motivate us to do the right thing, but not to like fly off the handle, right, or to go crazy. So when we're thinking like, John, where are we going with this? Okay, so let's connect it back. So Socrates thinks there are three parts of the soul, these different parts, and we put there before. The person who's ruled by their appetitive part can't bring their desires under control. That person's the addict, right? The person who's ruled by the spirited part can't bring their emotions under control. That's a problem as well. Only the person who's ruled by their rational part is in a position to be happy. This is the key insight. If you're an addict, right? If you're an alcoholic, right? You're going to have a really hard time living a happy life because you're always going to be thinking about alcohol. That is like your main focus, getting the next drink or something like that. The person whose spirited part rules, they're controlled by their emotions. They're going to have a hard time having like any sort of emotional stability because they're always experiencing these emotional highs and lows, ups and downs. That's not really the good kind of life that people want to live. Rather, we want to live a life that has appetites, that has spirited part, but also that's ruled by reason or rationality. And that kind of life can have the kind of stability and stable, goodness that is what we would want for ourselves. Okay, so what does this have to do with justice? Socrates thinks, well, it's that person whose rational part rules, that's the person who's just. So his thought is like, if these parts are in order, that's what justice is all about. If you're not just, that is, if the rational part of your soul isn't the thing ruling you, then your soul is going to be disordered, right? If your appetitive part rules, disordered. If your spirited part rules, disordered. And if you have a soul that's disordered, then you're going to be unhappy, even if you appear to be just. So even if you are an addict, but you somehow like steal these things and get away with it every time, you're still like not going to really be living a happy life because you've got that disordered soul. But of course, you don't want to be unhappy, right? So you don't want to have this disordered soul. So you should be just, right? Even if you're not going to appear to be just. So justice is about, for Socrates and Plato, it's about like having the rational part control yourself. The appetitive part gets out of control, there you're intemperate. You can't control the desires. If your spirited part gets out of control, then you're either going to be like cowardly or rash. And if that happens, like, things are not good. If the rational part rules, you're wise. If it's not, then you're foolish. That's bad. Justice is sort of having those parts in the right organizational structure. And if you have that, it's going to lead to you being like moral. It's going to be necessary for happiness. So here's the argument, Socrates' argument for being just. All right. So Socrates basically thinks, right, the reason to be moral, the reason to be just is because that's the only way to be happy. The unjust person is the one who's going to cheat other people for their own good to get away with these doing bad things, like selfishly or something. But Socrates thinks those people ultimately are going to be ruled by their passions, their spirited part, or their appetites, and that person's not going to live a good life. The moral person is the person that's going to live a good life. So think about whether or not you find that argument convincing. Think about that. And then for next time, the reading that we're going to do and the quiz work that you're going to be assigned is from Poyman. So Louis Poyman has this chapter called Why Should I Be Moral? And he's going to think about whether or not he agrees with Socrates or disagrees with him and why. And spoiler alert, right? So Poyman is going to disagree with Socrates, at least in part, and try and offer us an alternative view about why we should be moral. So take a look at that for next time, and we'll see you then.